Ho, ho, ho's, everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and welcome to the SIP Shelter in Place series on the Stir podcast. I'm your host, Trish Muyco-Tobin, and I'm joined by my Binge Bestie, entertainment columnist, sitcom producer, and author, Debbie Baldwin. Hello, Debbie.
Hey, Trish.
All right, Debbie, this is episode number 30 of our SIP Shelter in Place series. Can you believe it?
No.
So, of course, for those of you who are new to us, we created the SIP series in late spring and really as a spinoff to our regular Stir podcast. When we got our shelter in place orders, and really most important, as a diversion from the pandemic and the quarantine and all of that. And since then, thanks to Debbie, who is our bona fide entertainment guru, we've got hours and hours of show upon show, movie upon movie to binge on right in the comfort of our own home.
Well, I guess that's the silver lining.
Yeah.
Considering I think you and I thought we'd be doing this for maybe 4 or 6 weeks.
At the most.
Yeah.
At the most. This might be a fun time capsule because we're still here.
I'll have like a long gray beard and
30 shows later. Exactly. So this week, my goodness, this is fun. We are highlighting the rich and famous of the big screen. We are featuring films that have excess on display, characters and families dripping with wealth. I mean, all the eye candy imaginable. We're talking cars, clothes, even tiaras, food, of course, those mansions and a castle or two. Deb, explain away how you whittled down this movie list.
Well, as you can imagine, a lot of movies revolve around very wealthy people. I mean, it's something that we regular Joes are fascinated by. So
it's a fantasy, it's an escape for us.
Absolutely. I mean, there's just too many to count. So I tried to focus on movies that are really about money, about either the facade of wealth, or the characters are motivated by wealth, or that in some crucial way, aside from the fact that they just happen to be rich, money plays a part in the events that unfold in the film.
Definitely key to the plot. Yeah. And so we're going to begin this list in the 40s, at the turn of that decade, with a film that was originally a Broadway play, and the female lead in the play was specifically written for one of the Golden Age's biggest stars. And we are talking about Katharine Hepburn. And we are talking, of course, about the film, The Philadelphia Story.
The Philadelphia Story, everyone's heard the title, but I don't think a lot of people have seen the film. And it really is like one of the original rom-coms.
Yeah.
If you're in the mood for great acting, dry wit, some very, very sharp dialogue, this is a movie that still stands up, in 80, how many years later? 80 years later, is that right?
Yeah, the 40s, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's unbelievable. Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn are a divorced couple. The sparks still fly, however. He drank too much. She was overly critical. They were both young and stupid and couldn't make it work. Now, her Philadelphia family has approved of a new marriage for her after she divorces Cary Grant, and she is going to marry someone a little more suitable. And meanwhile, Cary Grant, who is sort of this despicable kind of old money,
right?
I think he's a yacht maker in the film, or a yacht broker.
Yeah.
But he's sort of a ne'er-do-well, has been working feeding tips to a gossip magazine. Now, if this all doesn't seem incredibly current, I mean, it's amazing that this movie is this old.
Yeah.
And he brings the photographer and the tabloid journalist to Katharine Hepburn's home in mainline Philadelphia to cover the wedding ceremony. He threatens Katharine Hepburn that the magazine will expose her father's affair if she doesn't allow it, so she reluctantly does. The photographer is played by Jimmy Stewart. There's
Another humongous name.
I mean, there's all kinds of romantic shenanigans. Katharine Hepburn is still in love with Cary Grant, but she's going to marry this other guy, and then the Jimmy Stewart character develops this crush on her. She has this little sister, Dinah, who is providing this just hilarious commentary throughout the film. It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, and I'm just fascinated by this lineup. You just see those names, it's like, whoa, how they do that. And I was surprised to find out, interestingly enough, Cary Grant was the first one cast, and he was given the choice of which male lead to play, and surprised many by choosing what was considered the less showy role. And so, however, he demanded top billing for this film. And of course, being Mr. Grant, he got it. He earned $137,000 for this film, which was unheard of in 1940.
Yeah.
Right. But Mr. Grant donated his entire earnings to the British War Relief Fund, which was very nice to hear.
Claps for Cary Grant. That's awesome.
Yes. Another interesting thing about this movie, and the play as well, the character played by Katharine Hepburn, Tracy Lord, was actually based on a Philadelphia socialite, and her name was Helen Hope Montgomery Scott. And she was known for throwing lavish parties on her family's 800-acre estate. And so the filmmakers originally thought they wanted to shoot this movie at the estate of Miss Scott, but when they got to it, they saw the expansiveness of the property and the main house, and they changed their minds, and they said, no one would believe anyone in America lived like that, especially in the 40s, but haha, the joke was on them.
Wow.
So that was, such a classic. And You're right. It has endured all these years later.
I think people think I know the name, but I don't really know what it's about. Like, is it a comedy? Is it a drama? It's a comedy, and it is a funny film. So if you're curious and want to catch up on some classics, put Philadelphia Story on the top of the list.
Definitely. All right. So from the 40s, we're going to take a big jump into 1970 with a film that was the top box office earner that year. It is considered one of the most romantic movies of all time, made more than $136 million at the box office. It was a big hit nationally. It was a huge hit globally. And we're talking about Love Story.
And this was a movie, if you did not take your significant other to Love Story in the 70s, you were considered an irresponsible partner.
Yes.
I think every single person that saw Love Story was in some kind of romantic relationship. It is the ultimate tragic love story. Spoiler alert, I guess, if you don't know what happens in Love Story. I'm sorry.
I think it's one of those things people know, even if they haven't seen it. Yes.
But it is a money movie. Brian O'Neill plays Oliver, who is a wealthy prep school Harvard hockey player who is enamored with
Jenny,
who's played by Ally McGraw, who is a blue collar scholarship girl at Radcliffe, back when Harvard and Radcliffe were all male and all female, or predominantly, I should say. I think Harvard started taking women in the 60s. But when their income disparity is an issue in their relationship, and when Oliver takes Jenny to meet his family, and if you can't, that scene is burned in my memory of him driving onto the driveway. Talk about the 800-acre estate. of Ryan O'Neal driving her up that winding driveway to that palatial mansion in Massachusetts.
Yes.
To introduce her to his father, who's played by Ray Milland, and he does not approve.
No, he doesn't. He sure doesn't.
Does not have the breeding he requires. So Ryan is Oliver is cut off financially from his family, and he and Jenny marry, and they, rent this little apartment. And it's just this is one of those movies where so many of these films, you'll notice, are like that the money is this kind of shell, it's an empty shell of money. A lot of times, like there's a lot of darkness and emptiness in these movies, and this one is so fantastic in the sense that their love, like there's so much there, that they thrive as a couple despite his change in circumstances, up until she gets diagnosed with a terminal illness, and their love affair is short. Has this movie, I'm getting choked up because it's a sad movie, but
I'm right with you.
One of the stupidest lines. And I know it's legendary, and it's probably on AFI's list, and I know you're going to tell me it is.
It is.
Love means never having to say you're sorry.
And you know what? You'll notice that with a lot of these films, we have lines that have ranked among the top movie quotes of all time. Yeah. And this one, it is well-known, world famous, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
I think if their marriage had lasted longer, she would have maybe taken that back. But she says it to Ryan O'Neal, to Oliver. Jenny says it to Oliver. And then at the very end of the film, he walks out of her hospital room, and his father has rushed to the hospital, having had, rethought his feelings about their relationship. And Ryan tells her, that Jenny has died, and the father tells him he's sorry. And then the film sort of ends with Oliver telling his dad that love means never having to say you're sorry. So,
and by that time you're ugly crying anyway, so you're not able to make sense of anything. You just accepted it, and
I don't even know what's happening. I don't know if there were credits. No, I mean, I didn't, obviously was too young to see it in the theater. But it's.
And Deb, I mean, just as iconic as the movie itself is the theme song. I mean, just gives me
beautiful
goosebumps every time I hear the opening notes, and then you are filled with the golden voice of Andy Williams with "Where Do I Begin?" And my gosh, I'm out. I'm undone.
It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. There's a lot of beautiful music on this list, but that definitely ranks way up there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Everything about that movie is gorgeous. And then you think, now I don't know if we haven't had a really good tragedy in a long time, film wise.
Yeah.
In life, it seems that it's happening every time we turn around. But a good, sad, tearjerker love story. I remember
sometimes it feels good to cry it out. This is one of the films.
Oh God. And then they made the huge mistake of trying to make a sequel, which they made Oliver Story, starring Candice Bergen and Ryan O'Neal, which, what a betrayal. I mean, that was a huge mistake. So
let's even sadder than the movie ending.
Own little capsule, this magical moment that those two, that Jenny and Oliver had, short, Shakespeare says burns bright, but
there you go. Yeah, I completely ignored the sequel because did not want to ruin it at all. So there you have it, Love Story from 1970. We move on to the next decade, 10 years later to 1981, and to a film called Arthur.
Also a love story. Where's the rest of this moose? Dudley Moore, Arthur Bach.
Arthur Bach.
One of the greatest films of all time. It's on my top 10 list of the best films of any genre. It is the funniest movie.
Hilarious.
I honestly, it's flawless in its comedy. Dudley Moore. John Gielgud plays Arthur Bach's butler. Arthur Bach is a soon to be, I mean, we could say now billionaire, but at the time it was probably I think he was 100 millionaire.
Well, actually, so the Bach family fortune at the time was supposed to be 750 million,
Okay,
and
so,
if
yeah,
adjusted
they
for
stayed there.
inflation,
You said,
Arthur Bach would be worth 2.1 billion in 2020. So there you go.
well, thank you very much. $8. And he is an alcoholic and a bit miserable and drives around in his limo. And his butler, John Gielgud, who, as I mentioned, won the Oscar, is highly critical but very loving and paternal
Yeah.
towards a sort of sad, lonely Arthur Bach who has no family to speak of. I mean, he has biological relatives, but he has no one in his life who's any sort of support structure. So there's this kind of wonderful, tragic comedy component to his character. And he runs into Liza Minnelli's character. She's shoplifting at Bergdorf Goodman. And so, and I have to say, I mean, Liza Minnelli is a phenom. She's a superstar. She is a shining light. Cabaret. I think she was woefully miscast in this movie, and she really kind of stands out as a little jarring.
Yes, and not in a good way.
Not in a good way.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm willing to overlook it because the movie's so good. But Dudley Moore comes to her rescue as she is accused of shoplifting. She is shoplifting at Bergdorf Goodman. And their romance travels from there. And she's poor. She lives in Queens with her dad. And
I think her dad was played by Barney Martin, who was Jerry's dad in Seinfeld, if I could recall.
Fantastic. That's right. Except for the pilot episode, there was a different dad.
Yes, yes.
Or in the first season. But anyway, yeah. So, and he's great. You know, he's that sort of working class, blue collar guy who's so over the moon. His daughter's dating a rich guy. But, and I mean, that scene when Dudley Moore shows up at her house and he's, you know, he trips over the hedge and he's talking about, don't you hate George's wife? I can't remember the guy's name. He's like, don't you hate Harry's wife? She's screaming that she's going to call the police. He goes to the wrong apartment. But anyway, I'll get carried away doing my Arthur impression, and then we'll, you know, lose all of our viewers, and you'll fall asleep. So we should probably.
Oh, you touched upon Arthur Bach's accent, notably Dudley Moore's English accent. They did try to have the actor modify that accent, but Dudley Moore was having trouble. And he kept messing up. And in the end, he convinced the director to let him keep the English accent. And so there was some backlash. You know, how do you reconcile the fact that Arthur had a different accent from his father? But, you know, some on Team Dudley pointed out that with all that money, of course, they would have invested in Arthur having a proper English accent. And who better to learn it from? None other than Hobson the butler.
Yeah. Oh, but before we move on, we have to mention music on this one.
Oh, yeah.
Even though it's not my favorite song, When You Get Caught Between the Moon and New York City won the Academy Award that year.
Yes. So, and again, you know, the measure of a great movie song is every time you hear that song on some easy listening channel, you immediately think of Arthur.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. 100%. Okay, so from Arthur, we move on to 1983, just a couple years later, and we are talking about the movie that starred Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, and it is Trading Places.
Who has been putting their cools out on my carpet? Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, and of course, Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici, who play the Duke brothers, the financial wizards brothers who are bachelors and very curious about nature versus nurture, and they wager $1 that they can take their most well-bred, successful, intelligent employee, Dan Aykroyd, and swap him with the most poor, uneducated, rough around the edges guy, Eddie Murphy, and switch their places and see what will happen. And one of them wagers that Dan Aykroyd will turn to a life of crime and Eddie Murphy will rise to the occasion and, see how it all plays out.
Right.
So they set Dan Aykroyd up, get him out on the street, accuse him of having drugs. He loses his friends. He loses his beautiful Philadelphia townhouse and ends up at the mercy of a prostitute played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who takes him in and kind of helps him out, believing, as he promises her, that he is in fact a rich guy who has means and can pay her. Meanwhile, Eddie Murphy thinks he's been the recipient of some sort of civic program, and they put him in the job of being a commodities broker within their company, the Duke's company. I mean, it's Trading Places. Everyone's seen it. You guys know the Dukes are, everybody's rich. Dan Aykroyd's rich. Eddie Murphy becomes
rich.
And then you see the Dukes, that house in Philadelphia.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So the Dan Aykroyd rich seem not even that rich.
Yeah. I mean, just the amount of laughs from this movie, just because you have those actors, my gosh, definitely worthwhile.
Now, here's something interesting. Did you know that originally this script was written for Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder?
It was written for Pryor. Did not know about the Wilder thing.
Yes, after the success of Stir Crazy,
yes,
they were going to cast Gene Wilder as the Dan Aykroyd character and Richard Pryor as the Eddie Murphy character. However, in an infamous incident, Richard Pryor lit himself on fire freebasing cocaine. So, and I mean, literally, like, if you look up the film on like Wikipedia, it's just like a little afterthought, and it'll be like, the studio originally wanted to cast comedian Richard Pryor in the Murphy role. Unfortunately, Pryor lit himself on fire freebasing cocaine, and the studio went with Eddie Murphy. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had to come up with some sort of
happens, I guess. But yeah, and I mean, I can't imagine this film with any two different actors. I mean, Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy are so perfect in both parts. It's everything about this movie is a joy. It's so funny. It's so clever. I mean, I have nothing else to add.
Yeah, I mean, for Eddie Murphy too, it was definitely a star maker for him. Prior to this, he had only done Beverly Hills Cop, and after Trading Places, his stock shot up considerably. He was considered then the biggest movie star after Clint Eastwood, and also after Trading Places, he was able to sign an exclusive 5-film contract worth $25 million, again, unheard of back in the day, with Paramount. So yeah, it was definitely a notable film. So if we are going to talk about 80s excess, Deb, we can't not mention the epitome of 80s excess on film, and that is the film Wall Street.
Okay. We've talked about Wall Street already. Michael Douglas plays Gordon Gekko, who is the ultimate embodiment of everything that is wrong with Wall Street and finance. He operates on pure greed. His speech on greed is what won him the Academy Award. Michael Douglas is fantastic. The film also stars Charlie Sheen and his father, Martin Sheen, as father and son again. Charlie Sheen playing Bud Fox, this sort of blue-collar guy, blue-collar roots, who kind of makes it, and Gordon Gekko kind of takes him under his wing and teaches him about greed, teaches him about making money and what his life is going to be like if, once he lets go of those silly little things like morality and ethics. And so, one thing I thought was interesting about this was Michael Douglas I don't know if other people were considered for this role, but Oliver Stone, the director, cast Michael Douglas in the part, and Michael Douglas thanked him at the Academy Awards and said, and I quote, "Thank you for casting me in a part that nobody thought I could play." And I think that's so interesting because now, in retrospect, I can't imagine any other actor really playing that role of Gordon Gekko as well as Michael Douglas did. He was so slick and so sort of to the manner born. He really just wore that role like a suit, and I absolutely deserved the Academy Award for it. And this is a movie, again, we're talking about a movie about our list is about luxury and wealth. And this is a movie that really kind of explores that dark side, at what cost?
Right, exactly.
Wealth coming to you. And it was a price Michael Douglas' character, Gordon Gekko, was certainly willing to pay. But Fox, Charlie Sheen's character, is not willing to pay that price, which is, basically, as I said, like losing your moral compass.
Exactly. And then talk about movie quotes. We all know the 3-word line, which is greed is good. The original quote actually is, "The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good." So there you have it. My gosh, Gordon Gekko. And speaking of lines, Deb, our next film gives us the famous, although just really, really strange line, "Excuse me, would you mind lending me your wife?" In this Indecent Proposal.
I've got it. And actually, I'm glad that these are right next to each other because, again, this plays with that concept of at what cost. This time, and this movie, boy, I mean, I really had to think about whether or not to include this movie on the list because it was not well reviewed. Indecent Proposal was a 1993 film starring Woody Harrelson and Demi Moore, directed by Adrian Lyne, who directed Fatal Attraction. And Robert Redford plays essentially a billionaire who offers the couple $1 million for one night with the wife.
Yes.
And they meet at a casino. It's this, Demi Moore and Woody Harrelson's characters have fallen on hard times financially. They've lost their house, or they're losing their house. Woody Harrelson's lost his job, and they go to a casino, and I'm trying to remember the backstory. It's like one last blast. They're going to try and win a lot of money.
Right.
And at the craps table, they encounter the Robert Redford character, who is immediately taken with Demi Moore and offers them $1 million for one night.
You said you were kind of thinking about whether to add this to the list, but I'm glad you did, because it just shows you, with a lot of these wealthy people, the sense of entitlement. Who has the nerve to come up to anybody and make this kind of proposal? But again, we're talking Robert Redford here, and he just has that certain je ne sais quoi.
That sort of evil, with that kind of money and power comes boredom, comes challenge.
Right.
Ruining people's lives, fucking with people. It's all, kind of a, you can see it. It's believable to me, this movie.
I was going to say, give me one married woman watching that film who did not apply that question to herself.
I know. And sort of said, like, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, honey.
Yeah.
Have a good night. If you need me, I'll be on the boat.
Yeah.
But, it's just the story. And then Woody Harrelson's character has this complete freak out about it after he's accepted the money, and he's trying to prevent them from consummating this relationship. The Robert Redford character, as it turns out, is a little more invested in Demi Moore than you initially thought. And it wasn't necessarily just this kind of,
right.
What does he call it? I think a millionaires club or something.
Yeah.
He has genuine feelings for her. I don't know. This movie was weird. There were so many alternate endings like running through my head while I was watching it. And the ultimate way it plays out is, again, this sort of tragic, no one's ever going to be the same. There was no one really to root for because Woody Harrelson's character was sort of spineless anyway.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the flaw in the film, is that you don't really like any of the characters.
I agree. And you hit it right on the head there, because I was the same way. There was nobody to empathize with.
Yeah.
So yeah, Indecent Proposal. And so now we are going to move on to 1995. This is a film that was loosely based on Jane Austen's Emma, and of course set in modern day Beverly Hills, where teenagers like Cher Horowitz have their own masseuse. And we are talking about the movie Clueless.
Yeah, this movie, I mean, it really is sort of all about money, but money is the backdrop of this film. Yes. It's not a character in the film.
No. But it did definitely provide you with the eye candy.
Absolutely.
Subtle, because the characters were, the ones you were focusing on, but it was there.
Yeah, the clothes, the houses, the hats, the cars. And Alicia Silverstone plays Cher, who's, as you said, it's based on Jane Austen's Emma. Her stepbrother, who's played by Paul Rudd, who's this sort of gothy college guy, and she's can't stand him in that way, that she secretly loves him.
He had money, but he certainly was more jaded about the whole thing.
Yeah, and in that sort of college kid, I'm a communist kind of way.
Yes.
And then her Cher's little friend group, which is amazing, played by Stacey Dash and Brittany Murphy. And then the guys, Breckin Meyer in this movie, Jeremy Sisto is in this movie. It's a lot of actors got their start, and really their careers really took off after this film. But Clueless is a great comedy. Amy Heckerling directed. She went and hung out in Beverly Hills at the high school, at the mall, picking up colloquialisms, picking up expressions as if. And the movie rings very true. I have to say, I rewatched it with my kids over the Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay.
I tried not to process too much that the girls are, I think, 15 in the movie. They're freshmen in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're talking, one of them's not a virgin. They're losing their virginity. They're discussing losing their virginity. And it's a very young age in my mind to be.
Oh, I agree. But I guess it's all part of the package.
Yeah, I don't know if that's sort of the lifestyles of the rich and famous, or
loose and fast.
Maybe it was written for like juniors in high school. It maybe would have felt a little bit better, but it was, it was a little jarring to realize that as I was rewatching that film. But it's still a great, great movie and very funny.
Oh, very funny indeed. So from Beverly Hills, we will take you to the make-believe kingdom of Genovia for our next film, and that is The Princess Diaries.
All right. So Anne Hathaway playing a bullied, blue-collar San Francisco high school kid
named Mia,
who discovers upon her father's death that she is the heir to the throne of a fictitious European country called Genovia.
Okay, which is every girl's fantasy. I mean, who didn't dream of being a princess growing up? This is like the perfect scenario.
Yeah. And she has the kind of nerdy best friend, and the nerdy best friend's brother has a crush on her, and she has a crush on the most popular guy in school. And it's all the normal high school dynamics, and then she's whisked away to be trained and prepared to assume the throne.
She actually had to take princess lessons.
Yes. Julie Andrews came out of retirement to play the role of her grandmother, Clarice. And she, you know, her first Disney film since Mary Poppins.
Oh yeah, Mary Poppins. Yes.
So, and Hector Elizondo playing Joe, the loyal.
Great. Yes.
I don't know, butler. What would you call
I think it was
him?
like a chauffeur who was assigned to Mia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We'll just call him Joe.
So, I mean, listen to these names: Reese Witherspoon, Kirsten Dunst, Alicia Silverstone, and Brittany Murphy from Clueless, Katie Holmes, among those considered to play Mia.
I have this list too. I have
You have more?
oh my God, Cameron Diaz, Kate Hudson, Claire Danes, Jessica Biel.
Wow.
It is unbelievable. Sarah Michelle Gellar. Every girl in Hollywood wanted that role, I think.
Okay, so do you know what reportedly happened and why Hathaway ended up with the role?
No.
Okay, so this was just fascinating, and I hope it's true because it's just the coolest thing. So, director Gary Marshall's granddaughters were the ones who were reportedly behind it and convinced Grandpa to cast Hathaway because Anne Hathaway, according to the granddaughters, had more princess-like hair.
I love that.
Yes. And so, of course, they would fixate on the princess hair. So reportedly, that is how Anne Hathaway got the role. And, you know, aside from the hair, fashion, also a major player in this film, not just Mia's outfits, but Queen Clarissa's outfits. I mean, her gowns were inspired by Bill Blass, Chanel, Dior, and let's not forget those tiaras. You know, wow.
Yeah. And as you said, it's every nerdy high school girl's fantasy to discover she's actually rich and a princess. And
Yeah.
one thing that I thought was interesting is the character of Michael, who ends up being Anne Hathaway's love interest in the film, is played by an actor named Robert Schwartzman, who is the brother of Jason Schwartzman, who is about to
okay.
top our list. He is the son of Talia Shire, who is Adrian from the Rocky movies.
Really? Okay.
He is the cousin of Sofia Coppola and Nicolas Cage. And I thought it's going to be interesting coming up later that this Coppola-Schwartzman relationship is, that those families are related.
Well, yeah, actually, it's coming up now because speaking of some heavy duty tiaras and crowns, our next movie features the real life Queen of France. In fact, she was the last queen before the French Revolution, and that is the movie Marie Antoinette. And, you know, make all the connections you can, Debbie.
And in this movie, directed by Sofia Coppola,
yes,
starring Jason Schwartzman as Louis XVI, and Kirsten Dunst as Marie Antoinette.
Yes.
Comes this very cool, modern, weird version of the story, which was met with, I would say, mixed reviews at best. I think it's done better over time. You and I talked about, The Shining, for example, which got shitty reviews when it came out. And now people are like, oh my God, it was the greatest. Nobody got it. Nobody got Kubrick. And he's such a genius. And I think there's a little of that happened with Marie Antoinette to a lesser degree. I think that purists kind of found that has a very modern rock soundtrack, very contemporary, deliberately so.
Which I liked.
And oh my God, it was like prophetic because you're looking at the original. I mean, my God, there had been Instagram in,
Right, exactly.
It's they were young, they were privileged, and they were naive. And Marie Antoinette was 14 when she married him.
I know, yeah.
You have to factor all these things and think about if you have a 14-year-old child. Imagine them
being
suddenly
Queen of France.
come on. Anyway, and it's the story really starts with that initial just stupidity of a preteen teenage girl, and they don't have sex right away. They don't start their families right away because they don't really know what they're doing or if they're attracted to each
Yeah.
other. Jason Schwartzman's this kind of dolty king who's interested in other things. And as she matures, she starts to get some sense. It's tragic because it truly gives you the sense that if she had just gotten the picture a little earlier, she'd been 5 years older than she was and figured out what was going on, like her little 14-year-old brain couldn't really process what was going on in France.
Good point. Yeah, that might have changed some things.
That could have been great. And I don't know. It's an interesting movie. It's visually unbelievable. It's on our list because of money, not because of
right. But my gosh, that is though just everything that this movie had in terms of production value worth the price of admission. I mean, what really sets this film apart, I thought, was the filmmakers were given unprecedented access to Versailles by the French government. You can just see in the movie just how much accommodations were made. The Hall of Mirrors during the filming, it was actually under renovation, but they were allowed to film the wedding scene there.
And it's also scenes when she's running through the palace
that are
burned in my memory. They're so beautiful.
that scene. And then the crew members were given permission to store their equipment in Marie Antoinette's actual bedroom, if you can believe that. So that's the kind of access they had. And speaking of eye candy, Deb, Jamie Dornan, this was his first movie role, and he played Count Axel, who was Marie Antoinette's lover.
Yeah.
And so
I did not realize that was Jamie Dornan, but
I didn't either. I didn't either.
With him too.
Well, so if you're going to see this movie again, take a good look, because apparently the director, Sofia Coppola, apparently was inspired by the pop star Adam Ant for Jamie Dornan's look in the film. So that's going to click.
Okay.
You know who Adam Ant is.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's not surprising at all, just given the amount of eye candy here. It won the Oscar for Best Costume Design.
Yes, and it's well deserved. And I will say this, that despite the mixed reviews in the US, I think in France, the film did very well. The French really liked it right from the start. And as I said, it's the opinion of the film has improved over time, and it's worth watching. It's a cool movie.
Yes. Yeah. If you love shoes, Manolo Blahnik designed hundreds of shoes for this film. And of course, the French loved it because Ladurée, the French luxury baker, was the film's official provider of all those pastries and all those sweets that you see spread out on that table.
Along with her morning wake up routine was the other thing of the lavish lifestyle that kind of really stuck with me. She's got the staff like surrounding her bed, and she doesn't wake up before 10 because she's partying until 5 in the morning and getting her all ready for the next day. I'm like, wow, I don't know if I'd want all those people in my bedroom, but it would certainly be nice having people lace my shoes and brush my teeth and do all that stuff.
I do it for like a day. It sounds like fun to me, my gosh. So yeah, that is Marie Antoinette. And from the French opulence to the glamour of the roaring 20s back in the States, we're going to now talk about the 2013 film, The Great Gatsby.
And this is a remake of a remake of a remake of a remake based on the F. Scott Fitzgerald novel, which is broadly considered to be one of the greatest American novels ever written.
Oh, yeah.
And has spawned many failed attempts to create a film. Most notably in 1974 with Robert Redford and Mia Farrow, with Sam Waterston playing the Nick role, the narrator. The 2013 version stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Carey Mulligan, with Tobey Maguire stepping in as the Nick Carraway character. Baz Luhrmann directs this.
Of Moulin Rouge fame.
Moulin Rouge fame. And as you can imagine with Baz Luhrmann, it does not fall short in the visually stunning.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
This movie, however, as every person who wrote a paper their junior year in high school on The Great Gatsby knows, it's an American tragedy. There is no hero in this story. There is no one to root for. You kind of root for Gatsby, but he is the ultimate anti-hero. He has fallen in love with Daisy many years before, has, through very mysterious and most likely criminal methods, amassed a fortune, and has moved into the neighborhood to ostensibly try and win her back with his over-the-top. It's just a massive misinterpretation of emotional connection. I mean, it's hard to really articulate where these characters go so wrong, but they all do.
They all do.
A bit of a loveless marriage. Her husband's not being faithful. Gatsby misinterprets Daisy's lack of desire for him as being that he's not financially secure. So when he gets financially secure, there's just more complications rolling in all the time. It's interesting that Nick, the narrator, initially refers to Gatsby. What does he call? There's an interesting start at the beginning of this film. He calls him like the happiest guy he knows, or there's some little kind of throwaway comment about Gatsby. And it's so untrue.
Right. Yeah.
So the way the whole movie unfolds is so everyone missing the point. And so Luhrmann very successfully makes the film about appearances, because that's what this story is about. It doesn't translate well into film, though, because you've got to really love a character to love a film. And there's not a character in this movie to love, in my opinion.
But I think, though, they finally, in this version of the film, they finally found a Gatsby in Leo, because I can't think of a more perfect actor to exude all that, that Jay Gatsby stuff.
No question. And the brilliant thing about this casting is that DiCaprio, unlike Redford, I love Robert Redford, don't get me wrong, but he lacks that vulnerability in his acting that Leonardo DiCaprio has in spades. So you just see a lot more torment and internal struggle with Leonardo DiCaprio's Gatsby than we've ever seen on film of that character before. And that's really what makes this film the best interpretation of the book by far.
In addition to all that eye candy, of course, I mean, all those scenes, just unforgettable if you've seen this movie. Deb, this was the film that ushered in that Gatsby themed party craze. Anybody who was anybody, many of the real life rich and famous threw Gatsby themed parties, including Sir Paul McCartney, whose very expensive birthday party went with a glitzy roaring 20s theme that year. Even CNN featured a story on how affluent parents can host Gatsby themed parties for their children. And, or as Moira Rose would say, for their trust fund bebés. And it was a thing. You know?
I know.
So there you have it, The Great Gatsby. Our final film is one of the highest grossing romantic comedies of all time. So far, it's made $235 million worldwide. Talk about opulence in full display. It's in the title.
Yeah.
We are talking about Crazy Rich Asians from 2018.
And you just don't get it until you see the movie or read the book. I mean, I knew on some level,
Mind blowing.
like there was this, like hyper rich, like elite culture in China and Singapore, but you just can't really wrap your brain around how crazy rich it
Oh
is.
my gosh. And that is the most mind-blowing thing about this movie and the novel that it is based on,
Yeah.
because it was actually based in real life
Oh
experience
yeah.
by
That's
the
what,
author Kevin
and
Kwan.
yeah, and and I think when you're watching it, there's no sense that this is made up. Um, you have the character Rachel, who's a Chinese American economics professor, struggling financially. Not, I mean, she's not destitute, but she's just living on a teacher's salary.
Right, right.
She meets Nick, her boyfriend, who cleverly, um, I guess he doesn't, I
He
mean, he
doesn't tell her at
withholds
first.
his family background from her. Um, Not maliciously, but just he doesn't want it to complicate their relationship. So when he flies her to Singapore to meet the family, she is a little taken aback by these crazy rich Asians. And it's so far over the top. I mean, these mothers like sitting around talking about these weddings and how this one woman, I can't even, I'm going to get the dollar amounts wrong, but I feel like this woman was like, oh no, my husband's put me on a strict budget for our daughter's wedding. We cannot spend more than $20 million.
Something, yeah.
Something like that.
Something
And like,
astronomical like
the
that.
wedding they're going to, they spent $50 million throwing this wedding.
And how can you forget that wedding scene? I mean, probably the most lavish, jaw-dropping walk down the aisle you've ever seen.
Amazing. And how much fun, tell me, if you're hired as the set decorator, as the set designer in that movie, and they say, this scene is a $56 million wedding. Go crazy. I mean, you have to retire after that. There'd never be a job as fun.
Oh my gosh. And I read an interview with Kevin Kwan, and he says when writing this book, he distinctly remembers a memory from childhood during which he visits the home of a friend. And he remembers, the family was part of old guard money in Singapore. And he says the friend's house had a sunken pond in the living room with baby sharks.
I mean,
As if sunken pond wasn't enough.
I mean, you kind of get the sense of like they're lighting cigarettes with $100 bills, on fire. Like it has no meaning anymore. Like the amount of money that's being spent is so. I mean, I have to say the wedding was phenomenal, but the scene that really kind of rocked me was the bachelor party.
Oh,
where the friend like rents out the entire cruise ship. I mean, it's crazy. Anyway, crazy
just
ridiculous.
the
Learn about like
imagery.
what it's like to live the most lavish, decadent lifestyle anyone's ever lived. I mean, in this modern times, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot wait for the sequel. A sequel is in the works based on Kevin Kwan's follow-up novel, China Rich Girlfriend. And if you have read that movie, you'll know, I mean, it's promising even more ridiculous wealth on display for the sequel. So good news for fans of this movie. Gosh, Deb, my gosh, it is dizzying the amount of wealth we've discussed today.
I know.
But just as Gordon Gekko would say, it's never enough. Of course, it's never enough.
Right.
So next time we'll have even more money and access to talk about when we tackle the rich and famous on TV. And of course, we won't let you go without dessert. And today we've got a cookie, but not just any cookie. We are talking about Nutella chocolate chip cookies, because why not? And just a yummy combination of hazelnut and chocolate. And it is just the perfect little cookie.
I can't wait. I'm a big chocolate chip cookie maker. I'm definitely going to give these a try.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So you will find that recipe along with other festive treats on Gazelle magazine binge-worthy.com. We give thanks to Debbie Baldwin. Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, Trish.
And of course to you for joining us. Thank you very much. And we will see you in the new year. Bye.